All right, welcome to AP World History. Welcome to this class. Hopefully, it'll be a really good year. Before we get into specific content, what I wanted to do is give you guys kind of an introduction to the concept of world history. You've probably taken a world history class before, but I really want to talk about what history is, why we study it, and what we will be learning about this year. Okay, so first off, I want you to just pause the video for a minute and answer this for me. Define the word ignorance. What does that word actually mean? All right, so if you look it up, ignorance basically means a lack of knowledge, information, and wisdom. It's not the same thing as being stupid, okay? It doesn't mean you are unable to learn. It means you have not learned or maybe will not learn, okay? And ignorance can cause tons of problems, all right? If you ask people, what is the number one problem in the world today? They're likely to give one of these answers or a variety of others. They're likely to say poverty, racism, drug abuse, violence, and those are all huge problems. But I believe that ignorance is the root cause of all of these problems and more. And therefore, I believe ignorance is the number one problem in the world today. And really, that's why I became a teacher, because I believe ignorance is such a big problem. It causes so many other problems. So, being a teacher, educating people, enlightening people, giving them knowledge, information, and wisdom. That's my small little way of fighting ignorance in my life. Okay, so now that we have determined why we learn in general, now I want to ask this question: why do we study history specifically? I mean, you have 4 years of high school. Every year you're required to take a history class. You've taken many social studies classes before this point. What is the point of it? Is it just to fill up your block schedule, or is there a reason why we value history so much to spend several years studying it? Well, there are many reasons why we study history and why it's so very crucial to do so. Number one is to learn from the past so that we do not make the same mistakes as people before us. Have you ever heard someone say, "Oh, I learned that lesson the hard way"? By that, they're not meaning, hey, I had to learn that in school and the test was really hard. No, they mean I actually had to experience it and learn it the hard way. Okay, so there are a lot of lessons of history that you will have to learn at some point in your life. And I guarantee you, learning those lessons in my class is easier than learning them out in the world. No matter how difficult my class is, it's always easier to learn like this. Okay, so that's why we listen up. A second reason why we study history is to appreciate what we have and where we and our ancestors came from. I hear a lot of people complain. I'm guilty of this myself, complaining about day to day life. But when you think about it, how many modern conveniences we have and how good we have it as 21st century Americans, you only get that appreciation. You only get that gratitude when you understand where we came from, where you understand history. Okay, that is how we appreciate what we have. Another reason we study history is to honor the memory of those who came before us. There are a lot of great men and women of the past we will be learning about this year, and it's right to do so, to honor them for doing so many great things. And finally, it's to better understand who we are. If you understand your past, you are much more likely to understand the present and make sense of your future as well. Okay, so that is why we study history. Now let me just ask you this question: what is history? So once again, just pause the video and just think for a minute. What is history? Well, history is the study of people, places, and events that happened in the past. But it's not just the study of that, it's also the study of how people have interpreted events in the past and what it means to us today. I'm going to repeat that one more time. All right, history is the study of people, places, and events that happened in the past, and it's also the study of how people have interpreted those events in the past and what it means to us today. A lot of times, how people have interpreted events is just as important as what happened in the event itself, all right? And we learn history, we learn what happened in the past through two sources: documents and artifacts. Documents and artifacts, all right? So what is the difference between a document and an artifact? A document is written, and an artifact is a physical object. And usually the more recent things have happened, the more we know about them. Also, documents tend to be more accurate than artifacts, since there's less room for guesswork. Now, there are a few terms to know before we start reading our textbooks, and we will be reading our textbooks this year from chapter 7 all the way until the end of the book. It's a lot of reading, but I know you are up to it. Some terms to know first: BC. Okay, you probably heard the term BC before. If you talk about, for example, 300 BC, that means before Christ. All right, so years that happened before the birth of Jesus are referred to historically as the number of years BC. Okay, so 300 BC, that means 300 years before the birth of Christ. And then on the other side is AD. A lot of people think AD means after death. No, 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 that is incorrect. Okay, if that was the case, after Jesus' death, then there would be a 30-year gap between BC and AD. That is not correct. AD is actually a Latin phrase, Anno Domini, and that is Latin for the year of our Lord. Okay, so these are the years that happened after the birth of Jesus and are still happening now. So, for example, 2019 AD. Okay, that's what this year is. 2019 AD, Anno Domini. All right, so just to test your knowledge here, to get a good time frame in our minds, which year happened first, 1000 BC or 2000 BC? Okay, well, we might think 1000 BC because that's a smaller number, and we usually associate those years as happening first. But for BC, the larger the number is, the longer ago it happened. Okay, so 2000 BC happened before 1000 BC. All right, so if we look on a timeline here, just going back about 6,000 years or so, all right, 4000 BC, then it gets smaller and smaller, 500 BC, then you have the birth of Christ, and you get all the way to the present with 2019 AD. All right, so that's the kind of timeline we are looking at. Another term for BC is BCE, which means before the Common Era. Now, your textbook speaks about years this way, and that's perfectly fine. If you would prefer to say BC instead of BCE on your papers for me, that is fine. But BCE is what the textbook uses, so you need to know what that means. And then another term for AD, what the textbook uses, is CE, which means Common Era. You got to know those two. Okay, BCE and CE, it's the same thing as BC and AD. It's perfectly fine to talk about years either way. Personally, I say BC and AD, but on the AP test, all right, and in the book, all right, the terms BCE and CE are used. Other terms to know: a decade, all right? A decade is a time period of 10 years, all right? So when you talk about the 1920s, okay, the 1980s, the 2010s, all right, that is a decade, a time period of 10 years. A century is a time period of 100 years, and a millennium is 1,000 years. All right, so you need to know those three vocab words there. Now, centuries are a little tricky because it's always one number off what you think it will be. Okay, let me explain real quick. AD, right now, we are in the 21st century. We probably all knew that. We are in the 21st century. But wait a minute, the year is not 2119, it's 2019. So why is this not the 20th century? All right, it's because the century number is always one number higher than the first two numbers of a year in that century. Okay, so for example, 1992 was in the 20th century. And this is because for the first 100 years after Jesus' birth, what we call the first century AD, okay, those are the years 1 to 99 AD, meaning that the 100s, okay, 100 to 199 AD, that was the second century. All right, now this is very important. If you need to go back in the video to hear me explain it one more time, please do that, okay, as many times as you need to, because this is very crucial. On the AP test a couple years ago, the question talked about the 19th century, which is the 1800s. But a lot of people wrote about the 1900s because they confused that with the 19th century, and they got all the points off on that essay and did not end up passing the AP exam. This is super important that you understand centuries. Please ask me if you have any questions so I can clarify it. So what we'll study in this class, up until 2018, the AP World History exam covered about 3000 BC to the present. And that's the time period I taught last year because that's when written history begins, is about 3000 BC. So that's when we can start studying it. But this year in 2019, the College Board changed the course to only cover the past 800 years. Okay, so 1200 AD. Any student volunteering for freshman orientation needs to go to the library at this time. Sorry about that announcement. So now the class only covers 1200 AD to the present. All right, so this course is only going to be covering the past 800 years instead of the past thousands of years. All right, so next week we're going to quickly learn ancient history to the Middle Ages. Okay, we're going to breeze right through it just so you have a base. And then in 2 weeks, we will start on the first era that will be on the tests, okay, the Middle Ages. We will get all the way to the present day by April. We will be covering all those years in one school year, and then we'll spend the last several weeks reviewing before the AP test on May 14th. Now, you are required to take the AP exam. If you have no intention to take that exam, you should not be in this class. You need to transfer out and get into regular world history. That is what we will be preparing for all year, is to do well on that AP exam on May 14th. I expect every one of you to do it. All right. Now, the last thing I want to talk about real quick is the test itself, okay, the AP test itself, just to give you a quick idea of what the test is like, since you have never taken a test like this before, in all likelihood. This is the scores. Okay, these are the scores from last year's students that took the AP World History exam throughout the entire country. Okay, we did not offer it here at Brandon High School last year, so this is nationwide here. All the people that, all the high schoolers that took the test. Okay, so with the exam scores here, you can get a 1 through a 5. Okay, 1 is the lowest you can get, 5 is the highest you can get. A passing score is a 3, a 4, or a 5. So that means if you get a 3 or higher, then you get credit for this in college, which means you don't have to take world history in college. You don't have to pay for that. You save money, you save class time, and who knows, maybe you can even graduate college a little sooner if you do several AP exams. Okay. Now, the percentage of the students last year who scored a 3 or higher, which means who actually got credit for the class, was 56% of all who took it. However, almost everyone in this class is a freshman, and for freshmen, the percentage is lower. Okay, it is actually 38%. Okay, only 38% of freshmen from year to year pass this test. I expect that number to be much higher for you guys. Okay, I have very high expectations for y'all this year. I want a very high percentage of you guys to get a 3 or above on the exam, and like I said, I expect every single one of you to take it with no exceptions. All right, the test itself has 4 components to it. The first one is multiple choice. You know about multiple choice. These questions are very complex multiple choice. It's not just simple matching or anything like that. There are 55 in-depth questions, and you get 55 minutes total, okay, 1 minute per question. And that is 40% of the test. That is multiple choice. The other 60% of the test is writing. We're going to be doing a ton of writing in this class. All right, so there are 3 types of written questions. All right, the first type is called short answer questions. You're going to have 3 questions, and you're going to answer them in 40 minutes total. Okay, so these are like a paragraph per answer, and that's 20% of the test. And then, after a 15-minute break, you're going to come back and do the DBQ. Okay, that means document-based question. You get a full hour on this. Okay, this is 25% of the whole test. You're going to be given 7 documents, and you have to analyze those documents and write an essay answering a question about them. It's very difficult. We're going to be spending a lot of time learning how to ace a DBQ question. All right, then you have an LEQ, which is a long essay question. You're going to select one of 3 questions to write a free response essay on, and they will use a reasoning process, which we'll talk about later. You get 40 minutes for that, and that's 15% of the total test. All right, so here's just an overlook of the test there. If you look on my wall, you can see the AP World History exam poster that I have. It has all this on it. You got 4 sections: multiple choice, short answer question, documents-based question, long essay question. Okay. 78% of these questions are stimulus-based, which means you'll have quotes or documents or maps or charts or artwork to look at and analyze. It's difficult, okay? It is a very difficult test, all right? But like I said, you are required to take it in my class. You do not get the weight for the class without it, okay? All right, so that's a quick introduction to what world history is and what we will be doing in this class. Also a quick glance at the test, what your test will look like when you take it on May 14th.